My name is Evelyn Monroe. I'm 35 years old, a cardiologist at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, and a single mother of 3-year-old triplets, Lily, Lucas, and Logan. 2 months ago, I was lying in an emergency room, bleeding internally after a car accident. My hands were shaking as I dialed my parents' number. I needed anyone to watch my 3 babies for just a few hours while surgeons tried to save my life. What I got instead was a text message in our family group chat that read, "You've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have front row seats with Celeste tonight. Figure it out yourself." So I did. From my hospital bed, I called a nanny service, paid triple the rate, and made a decision that would change everything. I cut them off completely: the monthly mortgage payments, the health insurance, the car repairs, everything I'd been quietly paying for the past 8 years. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on my door. Before I tell you who was standing there and what happened next, please take a moment to subscribe if this story resonates with you, and drop your name and time zone in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in the Monroe household in Evanston, just north of Chicago, I learned early that love came with a ranking system. My older sister Celeste was the star. 3 years older, effortlessly beautiful, with this magnetic quality that made our parents light up whenever she walked into a room. When Celeste announced she wanted to pursue fashion design, my mother cried happy tears. My father called her our little visionary. When I said I wanted to become a doctor, my father nodded slowly and said, "That's practical." Just one word. Practical. I told myself it didn't matter. I buried myself in textbooks, aced every exam, and clawed my way into one of the top medical schools in the country. 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency specializing in cardiology. The day I graduated from medical school should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. My parents arrived 2 hours late. "Sorry, sweetheart," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Celeste had an emergency meeting with a potential investor. We had to drop her off first." No flowers, no celebration dinner. Just a quick photo in the parking lot before they rushed off because Celeste needed emotional support after her meeting. Compare that to Celeste's first fashion show 3 years earlier. The whole family flew to New York, 5-star hotel, front row seats. Dad posted 17 photos on social media with captions like, "So proud of our talented girl." I got a parking lot photo and a lukewarm, "Congrats, honey." I told myself it made sense. Fashion is competitive. Celeste needed more support. Medicine is stable. I could handle things on my own. But what I didn't know then was that my parents' favoritism wasn't just emotional. It was financial. And I was the one footing the bill. It started 8 years ago, right after I finished my residency. Dad called me one evening, his voice tight with embarrassment. "Evie, we're in a bit of a bind. The mortgage payment is due and things are tight this month. Could you help us out? Just this once." Just this once. I transferred $2,500 that night without hesitation. They were my parents, of course I would help. But just this once became every month. The mortgage, then their health insurance premiums, $850 monthly when Dad's company dropped their coverage, then the emergencies, the car repairs, the roof leak, the new furnace. I never said no, not once. When I got pregnant with the triplets and their father walked out during my 5th month, I called my parents from the hospital after a scary bleeding episode. I was terrified, alone, desperate for support. "Oh honey, we wish we could come," Mom said. "But Celeste is so stressed after her show in Milan. She really needs us right now." They didn't come for the birth, not for the first month when I was barely sleeping, nursing 3 newborns while studying for my board exams. I remember sitting on the nursery floor at 3 in the morning, a baby in each arm and one in a bouncer, sobbing quietly so I wouldn't wake them. I had never felt more alone in my life. But the automatic transfers kept going out, $2,500 for the mortgage, $850 for insurance, whatever else they needed. I kept a spreadsheet. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me needed to see it in black and white. The numbers were staggering. 8 years, $380,000, give or take. I never asked for gratitude. I never expected a parade. But I also never expected to be called a burden by the people I'd been caring for almost a decade. That reckoning was coming. I just didn't know it yet. The accident happened on a Tuesday evening. I was driving home after a 16-hour shift. The light turned green, and I pulled into the intersection. I never saw the truck. It ran the red light doing 50 miles an hour. The impact hit my driver's side door. Glass exploded, metal screamed, and the world went black. I woke up in an ambulance, pain searing through my abdomen. A familiar face hovered above me. Evie, can you hear me? Marcus Chun, emergency physician at my hospital. We'd worked together for 3 years. Marcus. My voice came out weak and wrong. What's happening? You were in an accident. We're taking you in now. Possible internal bleeding. You're going to need surgery. Surgery. The word hit me like a second collision. My kids. I grabbed his arm. Lily, Lucas, and Logan. They're with the babysitter. She leaves at 8. Marcus checked his watch. It's 7:15. 45 minutes. I had 45 minutes to find someone to watch my 3 children while doctors cut me open. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. Blood smeared across the screen as I pulled up my parents' number. It rang 4 times. Evie. Dad's voice was impatient. We're about to leave. What is it? Dad, I need help. The words tumbled out between gasps of pain. I was in an accident. I'm being taken to the hospital. Surgery. Please, I need you and Mom to watch the triplets just for a few hours. Silence on the line. Then, hold on. I heard muffled voices. My mother's tone sharp and annoyed. Celeste's laugh in the background. The line went dead. Then my phone buzzed with a text notification in the family group chat. The message was from my mother. Evie, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have front row tickets with Celeste tonight. We've been planning this for months. Figure it out yourself. I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. A second message appeared from Dad. You're a doctor. You're used to hospitals. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Then Celeste, not words, just a laughing emoji. That was it. That was all I was worth to them. A laughing emoji while I lay bleeding in an ambulance. Marcus was watching me. I didn't realize he could see my screen until he spoke. Evie, his voice was careful. What did they say? I couldn't answer. Something had cracked open inside me, and it wasn't just the internal bleeding. I need a phone, I whispered. A phone with internet. Mine's dying. He handed me his without question. I Googled emergency nanny services, found one with 24-hour availability, called, and explained the situation in clipped, professional sentences. Yes, I would pay triple the rate. Yes, I would provide the babysitter's contact for handoff instructions. Yes, I authorized payment immediately. It was done in 4 minutes. Then I asked him to screenshot the messages from my phone before it died. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. As the ambulance pulled into the hospital bay, I closed my eyes and made the easiest decision of my life. I was done. The surgery took 4 hours, ruptured spleen, internal bleeding. Another few minutes and I might not have made it. I spent 5 days in the hospital. For drips, morphine haze, nurses checking my vitals every few hours. Not one call from my parents, not one text, not one visit. The emergency nanny service was expensive but worth every penny. They coordinated with my regular sitter, kept the triplets safe and fed, and sent me daily photo updates. 3 little faces smeared with spaghetti sauce. 3 little bodies curled up under blankets. Strangers took better care of my situation than my own family. On day 3, I asked the nurse for my laptop. Are you sure you're up for it? She asked. You should be resting. I need to take care of something. My hands were steady as I logged into my banking app. 8 years of automatic transfers stared back at me, regular as clockwork. $2,500 on the 1st of every month, $850 on the 15th. I canceled them all. Then I opened my phone settings and blocked my father's number, my mother's, Celeste's. There was no dramatic moment, no tears, no second guessing. It felt like setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Marcus stopped by later that afternoon. He checked on me every day, bringing coffee and quiet company. How are you feeling? He asked. I looked up at him and for the first time in years I told the truth. Better. For the first time in 8 years I actually feel better. He didn't push for details. He just nodded like he understood. I knew the fallout was coming. My parents would notice the missing money. They would rage and cry and demand explanations. But I didn't expect what came next. 2 weeks after my surgery, I was finally home, moving slowly, still sore but alive. It was a Saturday morning. I was making pancakes for the triplets, their favorite weekend treat. The kitchen smelled like butter and maple syrup. Lucas was trying to stack his toy blocks. Lily was helping by knocking them down. Logan was babbling in his high chair, drumming his spoon on the tray. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on my front door. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my heart rate spiking. If it was my parents, I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. I looked through the peephole and my breath caught. Standing on my doorstep was a tall man in his 70s, silver hair neatly combed, sharp blue eyes that I remembered from childhood. A posture that still carried the authority of 40 years on the federal bench. Grandpa Thomas. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. My parents always had excuses for why we couldn't visit. Too busy, too far, too inconvenient. I opened the door, and he pulled me into a hug so tight it made my surgical incision ache. "Evie," his voice was rough, "let me look at you." He pulled back, his eyes scanning my face, then dropping to where my hand rested protectively over my abdomen. "I know everything," he said quietly. "Eleanor told me." Aunt Eleanor, my mother's younger sister, was the only person in the family who'd ever openly questioned how my parents treated me. "Grandpa, He held up a hand. "You don't need to explain anything. But I do need you to come somewhere with me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, elegant, formal. An invitation. My 75th birthday party, next Saturday. The whole family will be there. His eyes met mine. "And I have some things that need to be said." Grandpa Thomas sat at my kitchen table, watching the triplets with a soft smile. They'd taken to him immediately, Lily showing off her stuffed giraffe, Lucas demanding he look at his block tower, Logan offering him a half-chewed teething ring. He accepted it gravely like it was a medal. "They look just like you did at that age," he said. "Same stubborn chin." I set down 2 cups of coffee and took the seat across from him. "Grandpa, how did you find out about the accident?" "About everything. Eleanor called me the night it happened." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "She'd heard through one of your cousins. When she told me what your parents did." He stopped, jaw tightening. "I've watched this for years, Evie. The way Patricia and Richard treat you versus Celeste. I'm old, but I'm not blind." I stared at my coffee. I thought maybe I was imagining it, making it bigger than it was. "You weren't." His voice carried the weight of a man who'd spent decades separating truth from lies. "I was a federal judge for 40 years. I know how to read people. I know what favoritism looks like, what exploitation looks like." He leaned forward. "Tell me something. Do you still have records of the money you sent them?" I nodded slowly. "Every transfer, 8 years." "Good." He sat back. "I want you to put together a summary. Every payment, every date, every amount." "Why?" "Because at my birthday party, in front of the entire family, I intend for the truth to come out." His eyes were steel. Not as an attack, not as revenge, simply as facts. And facts, as I learned in 40 years on the bench, have a way of speaking for themselves. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. I printed every bank statement, every transfer confirmation. 8 years of financial records organized chronologically, bound in a plain manila folder. Looking at it all together was staggering. Month after month, year after year, a river of money flowing in one direction. Aunt Eleanor came over 3 days before the party. She was 58, sharp-tongued, and had always been the black sheep of the family for refusing to pretend everything was fine. She flipped through the folder, her expression darkening with each page. $380,000, she said flatly. "Evie, do you understand what this says? This is more than most people make in 7 years of full-time work." She set down the folder. "And they called you a burden." I pressed my palms against the kitchen counter. "I don't want to destroy the family, Aunt Eleanor. I just want them to see, to acknowledge what I've done." "You're not destroying anything." She stood and put her hand on my shoulder. "You're just stopping the lie. They built their comfortable life on your silence. You're not obligated to keep giving them that." That evening, I got a text from a cousin I barely spoke to. "Heard you and your parents had a falling out. Celeste has been telling everyone you've been acting erratic since your accident. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I stared at the message. They were already spinning the narrative, painting me as unstable, preparing their defense before I even arrived. I hadn't wanted a fight, but it seemed they were bringing one anyway. The day of the party, I drove to Grandpa Thomas's house, a colonial estate on 3 acres of manicured land in Winnetka, with white columns and a wraparound porch that whispered old money and quiet authority. I pulled into the circular driveway, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Lily, Lucas, and Logan were in their car seats, chattering about the big house and the balloons they could see through the windows. More than 40 cars lined the property. The whole family was here. I wore a simple navy dress, professional, understated. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to tell the truth. The folder was in my bag. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Waiters circulated with champagne. A string quartet played in the corner. Crystal and silver glinted under the chandelier light. I spotted them immediately. My parents stood near the fireplace. Dad in his best suit, looking distinguished. Mom in a cream-colored dress, laughing at something someone said. They saw me at the same moment. Mom's laugh died. Dad's face went rigid. Then Celeste appeared. My sister glided over in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. Her smile was perfect. Her eyes were ice. "Oh, Evie." She air-kissed my cheek. "You made it. We heard about your accident. Nothing too serious, I hope." I met her gaze steadily. A ruptured spleen and internal bleeding. I almost died. Her smile flickered. "Mom said it was just a fender bender." Mom wasn't there. None of you were. The attack came 30 minutes into the party. I was getting fruit punch for the triplets when I heard Celeste's voice, deliberately loud, carrying across the room. "I'm so worried about Evie, honestly." She was talking to a cluster of aunts and cousins near the dessert table. The accident really affected her. She's been saying the strangest things. Cut off all contact with Mom and Dad for no reason. Mom joined in, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "We've tried everything, calls, texts. She won't respond. I think she's having some kind of breakdown." "Poor thing," someone murmured. "She's always been the sensitive one," Celeste added. "I think the stress of being a single mom to triplets has just been too much." I felt eyes on me, pitying looks, whispered concerns. I said nothing, just handed Lucas his juice cup and smoothed Lily's hair. Aunt Eleanor appeared at my side, her voice low and furious. "They've been laying groundwork all week, calling relatives, planting seeds. They know something's coming, and they're trying to discredit you first." "I know. Are you okay?" I looked across the room at my grandfather, who was watching with an unreadable expression, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He gave me the smallest nod. "I'm fine," I told Eleanor. "Let them talk." The room quieted suddenly. Someone clinked a glass. Grandpa Thomas rose from his chair. At 75, he still commanded attention like the courtroom judge he'd been for 4 decades. Every eye in the room turned to him. "Before we continue with the festivities," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly, "I have a few things I'd like to say." Before Grandpa could continue, my father stepped forward. "Dad, wait." His voice was controlled, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "Before you say anything, there's something the family should know." Grandpa raised an eyebrow. "Richard." Dad turned to face the room, every inch the concerned parent. "As many of you may have heard, my daughter Evie has been going through a difficult time. After her accident, she's been confused, distant. She's cut off contact with her mother and me completely." Mom stepped up beside him, still clutching that handkerchief. "We've only ever wanted the best for her. But she's been spreading terrible lies about us, saying we abandoned her, that we don't love her." The room was silent. "We've tried to be patient," Dad continued, "but it's been heartbreaking. We gave that girl everything." Celeste added, "She's even been claiming we refused to help her during her accident, which is absolutely not true." Then Grandpa Thomas's voice cut through the room like a gavel. "Are you finished, Richard?" The question was quiet, mild even, but every person heard the steel underneath. Dad's confident expression faltered. "I just thought the family should know." "The family should know the truth," Grandpa interrupted, "and I intend to give it to them." He walked to the center of the room, his gait measured and deliberate. "I've listened to your concerns. You've painted a very clear picture of a troubled young woman who's turned against her loving family. Now I'd like to ask some questions." He turned to my father. "Richard, a simple question. Who has been paying the mortgage on your house for the past 8 years? $2,500 a month." "Who?" The color drained from Dad's face. "We pay our own mortgage." "Do you?" Grandpa reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "My folder. Because I have here a complete record of bank transfers from Evie's account to your mortgage company, every month for 96 consecutive months." A murmur rippled through the room. "That's a misunderstanding," Mom stammered. Evie offered. "We never asked." "I'm not suggesting you held a gun to her head," Grandpa said calmly. "I'm simply establishing facts." He opened the folder. "Let me share some numbers with the family. I think they'll find them illuminating." The room was utterly silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Mortgage payments, $240,000. Health insurance premiums, $81,600. Car repairs, home maintenance, emergency expenses, $42,000. Cash gifts and financial support for Celeste's fashion ventures, $16,400. He closed the folder. Total, $380,000. Aunt Eleanor stepped forward. "For context, everyone, that's more than most people make in 7 years of full-time work. Evie did this while completing her medical residency and raising infant triplets alone." "She offered," Mom's voice cracked. "We never forced her." "No one said you forced her," Grandpa replied. "But I am curious, in 8 years of receiving this support, how many times did you say thank you?" No answer. "How many times did you visit her in the hospital after the triplets were born?" Still nothing. "How many times did you show up for her?" Then Grandpa pulled out his phone. 2 months ago, Evie was in a car accident, a serious one. She was bleeding internally, being rushed to emergency surgery. From the ambulance, she called her parents. Her 3 babies were home with a babysitter who was about to leave. She needed someone to watch them for a few hours. He paused, looking directly at my parents. This is the text message she received in response from her mother. I'll read it exactly. "Evie, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have front row tickets with Celeste tonight. Figure it out yourself." The room erupted. "That's not. You're taking it out of context," Celeste cried. "There is no context," Aunt Eleanor snapped. "What context makes abandoning your daughter during a medical emergency acceptable? We didn't know it was serious," Dad shouted. "Did you ask?" Grandpa's voice cut through. "Did you call her back? Did you come to the hospital?" Silence. The answer for those wondering is no, no, and no. Grandpa turned to face the room. "I'm not asking anyone to pass judgment. I'm simply presenting facts. What you do with them is your own choice." He looked at me, his eyes soft. "Evie, is there anything you'd like to say?" I hadn't planned to speak, but looking around the room at my crying mother, my shell-shocked father, my sister's crumbling facade, I realized I had something to say after all. I handed Logan to Aunt Eleanor and stepped forward. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came because for 34 years, I've been living with a version of my family that wasn't real. A version where I was the strong one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need anything." I looked at my parents. "I believed you when you said Celeste needed more support because her industry was harder. I believed you when you said I could handle things on my own. I tried to be what you needed me to be. But that night in the ambulance, bleeding and terrified, I finally understood. I wasn't strong to you. I was convenient. I wasn't reliable. I was exploitable. And no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough to make you see me the way you see her." I turned to face the room. "I don't hate you. But I can't keep pretending this is okay. I can't keep buying love that should have been free. From now on, I won't be sending money, not because I can't afford it, but because financial support should be a gift, not an obligation. And it should flow both ways in a family that actually cares about each other." I looked at Celeste. Families do help each other. So where were you when I was pregnant and alone? Where were you when I was raising 3 newborns while studying for boards? Where were you when I was bleeding out in an ambulance? She had no answer. I took Logan back from Aunt Eleanor. I need space, real space. If someday you can truly acknowledge what you've done, maybe we can rebuild something. But I won't hold my breath. My parents left the party early. No one stopped them. Celeste followed, head down, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed constantly. Cousins I'd barely spoken to reaching out to apologize. The family group chat went silent, then was deleted. My parents were quietly excluded from family gatherings. 3 months later, Aunt Eleanor called. They're selling the house. They couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. My father had to take a part-time job at a hardware store. My mother started doing bookkeeping for a local church. Celeste lost a major design contract after word of the party spread through her industry. I didn't rejoice. I just felt tired. That evening, I redirected the $3,350 I used to send them every month into a college fund for the triplets. That felt like justice enough. 6 months after the party, my phone rang. It was Celeste. Her voice was smaller, stripped of its polished confidence. Please don't hang up. I'm sorry for everything. For the way I treated you, for laughing at that text message when you were dying. What kind of person does that? She admitted she'd never asked about the money because she didn't want to know. I liked being the favorite. I liked that everything came easy. Now she said she was waitressing. I'm not asking for money or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now. What Mom and Dad did. I see all of it. I told her, then start from there. Stand on your own feet. Be better. She whispered. I'm trying. A year after the accident, I stood in my new apartment, a modest 3-bedroom near the hospital in a good school district. It was mine. No mortgage payments to ungrateful parents, no insurance premiums for people who called me a burden. Just rent, utilities, and a college fund growing steadily every month. The triplets were at Grandpa's for the afternoon. He'd become a fixture in our lives, picking them up every Sunday for adventures. Aunt Eleanor had become a close friend. You didn't become bitter, she said recently. A lot of people would have. I replied. Bitterness is just drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. If you've made it this far, here's what I learned. Love isn't a transaction you earn by being useful. The family I have now, Grandpa, Aunt Eleanor, friends like Marcus who showed up when my own parents wouldn't, they love me for who I am, not what I can provide. It took almost dying on an operating table to understand that. To anyone carrying a weight that was never yours to bear, it's okay to put it down. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're not a burden. You're finally free. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to draw a boundary with family? I'll read every single one.